Okay, so we're going to solve with a numerical table. I'm just going to do one kind of show you an example. Numerical tables are really there to help you to get your window so that you can solve graphically. Alright, so there are three different ways that you can kind of come at a problem, solving an equation. You can do it by hand, the algebraic method, which they call symbolic. You could graph them, find where they intersect. And then the numerical solution is set up a table of values. With your calculator can do this. And really, what you do with it, the calculator could find it exactly, and if it comes out to a nice number. But where you kind of do this is when you have an ugly equation, you want to find the answer. And if you're having a little trouble with the window, right, you can use the numeric table on your calculator to help you to get that window, and then really you're going to solve it graphically anyway. Alright, so how to do the table on your calculator. Alright, so suppose this is the equation we want to solve, and it's an ugly equation. It's got square root of 3 out front, times the group 2x minus pi, so it's got two irrational numbers, plus a 1/3 x, which is again an ugly fraction. Well, it's not really an ugly fraction, but it's a fraction that's non-terminating. And we want to find its zeros. Alright, well, one way we can sort of set it up and figure out where the zero is located is using a table. And then we'll solve it graphically. The table, again, will help us figure out where the zero is so that it'll be easier for us to find graphically. Because this equation's ugly enough that the zero could be well outside my normal window. Now, in this case, it's not, but it could be. So a good way to help you how to figure out what your window would be is to use this table method. Alright, so what you do is you go to your calculator and you enter in the graphing part of the calculator. So you go to the y=2. And you type in, again, be careful, type it just like I have here, put parentheses where I've got parentheses, the square root of, parentheses 3x, and the root, times, parentheses 2x minus pi, and parentheses, plus x divided by 3. It's just easier to type it in that way than 1/3 x. Alright, so that goes into the graphing part. Then you don't hit graph. What you do is you go to the table part in your calculator. So on your calculator, if you look at the top of the page, at the very end of your thing, there's a graph button. Above the graph button, so it's the very last button on the very end, is a table. All right, and so you're going to want to hit second trace. That's where your table is located. Now, you can set up your table to see whatever values you want. Can't read that. So again, you have your window. Under here, the very last button under here would be your graph key. And above that was your table. Alright, so you hit second trace the graph key and it'll take you to your table. Alright, so take you to a table that kind of looks like this. My graphing app is not currently working, so I tried to cut and paste and put everything in here as I could. So if you do hit table, it should show you a table. It might start at 1 or 0. You can adjust your calculator to make sure your window shows up. Alright, so to get the window that I kind of have here, where I've got it set up to go by the x value show up you can do any, increment means how often I see an x value. Alright, so I set up my table so I could see an x value incrementing by 1 unit. I gotta go from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, or so on if I keep looking at my table. And I go back 0 to -1, -1 to -2. So it's 1 unit between each and every x value. And so how you can make sure you do that, you go to, again, table setup, which is second the window key on the calculator. Alright, so there's your window key. Above it says table setup, and so you hit the second button, right? Your blue, green, whatever color your second button is. Hit second window, and it'll take you table setup. And then my table that I set up, it could be default. A lot of times it's default this way. But what you want you to just be set up as is your table will start at -1. So that's the first value you'll see. That delta table, this part here, tells you how much you're going to change. You're going to go up by 1 unit. You can change that to whatever you want. If you want to go up by 0.1 of a unit, it'll go by a tenth. So it'll show you every x value at a tenth. Or every x value you can go up by a half. Or by 5. You can go up by, 0.5. It'll go up by, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3.5. Or you could change it to 5. Then it'll go by 5s. It'll go 5, 10, 15, 20. And it'll show the table at those values. Right. These kind of leave these auto, so those should say auto, and then it'll give you the table. And so if you set it up this way, it'll show you a very similar table. Actually, it'll start at -1. Mine started at -3 is how I set mine up. Yours will start at -1, and it'll show you more values there. And then what you're looking for when you're looking for a 0 is you want to see when does it change from positive to negative or vice versa. And so that change in this particular case is happening here. At the 1, it's a -1.644. At the 2, it's a positive 2.153. So the only way to get from a negative number to a positive number, meaning it had to hit 0 sometime between that. So I know that the 0 has to be between the values 1 and 2. And this is actually what your calculator does to figure this out. That's why it asks you when it does the program, and it asks you when you're finding your 0 graphically, it asks you to go to the left of it, the right of it. It's asking you for this. It's asking you to go to the left of it, where you get a negative value or a positive value, and then the right of it, which again should be the opposite. Alright, so if you had a positive value on the left, it should be a negative value on the right, or vice versa. And then it solves it. It goes back and forth until it hits a 0. Alright, so the table can... So where this is useful is if you're trying to get a good window. Sometimes windows are hard to find on the graphing calculator, and so you can kind of use the table to help you out with that. Alright, look at the table to see when does it look like a 0 should occur. So how big or small do I need my window to be? Alright, so I'm actually going to solve this one graphically. So this is already in the calculator. Since it lands between 1 and 2, a standard window should work, which is your 10 by 10 window. That's supposed to say standard, not stand. Standard window. Alright, so that's already typed in. You go and make sure your window is a standard window, or you just hit zoom standard, which is the 6th one down in the zoom, and then it'll graph it. Alright, so you type that out on the calculator, and we're going to solve that one graphically. Alright, we're going to find, remember, we're finding the 0 graphically, which we practiced this in the last one. And so it's just in there in the calculator, and so you're going to find what is the solution to this problem. And so if you graph it out, it does cross. If you have your window there, it crosses. Alright, this is where we want to find our 0. And so what you do is make sure you go to the left, which this would be a negative x value. Then you go to the right. This should be a positive x value. I know it's landed between 1 and 2, right? So I kind of zoomed in between 1 and 2. I know it's there. And so I find this 0, and then your guess is as close as you can get. And then you hit your calculator button 3 times, right? You go to the left of it, you go to the right of it. Remember, it's second trace, and in the window you go to second trace. It's the second one down, which will find my 0. It'll ask you to go to the left, the right, guess, which we did this in the last video. And then it'll find the x value, and when it does that, it comes out 1.516, and so there's the solution. The solution to this problem, which it does land between 1 and 2, right? So this is correct. And so to the nearest tenth would be at 1.5. Alright, so that's for the nearest tenth. And so the 0 occurs, this function is equal to 0 around 1.5. Alright, it's just a little bit bigger than 1.5, but it's around 1.5. And that's kind of how tables are used to kind of get us to, and really they're just an aid to help us when we're solving for graphing, so that we can get a fairly good looking window. Alright, so that's using tables to get us to a window.